As the first question, let me ask a question from Mr. Sabakdast. Uh, we are part of the judicial powers advancement and innovation center. Other institutes have pushed for this view during these years that we should be looking for good laws. What is a good law? As we see it, includes in it the beneficiaries' problems and also their solutions that are appropriate. That's a challenge we have these days. There are some laws that moderately not address every beneficiary's concerns, or the solution they provide is not all encompassing. And other than the point of legislation and making rules, is our interpretation of those rules and the governance of those rules, the enforcement of them. And some people may believe that the rule of law might prevent some companies or some companies from the private sector. They believe that outside the law they might have solutions, they might reach solutions faster, better solutions. And some people might disagree and say, yeah, rules are there for a reason and to stop some misuses and breaches of conduct. But some say that some things should be more open to interpretation, because not everything can be reached through law and can be encompassed in law. So, in your opinion, how much does the rule of law from the sovereignty of our company has an effect on the relationship between the public sector and the private sector? And and obviously because you have prior experience in the public sector, how much would it help? How much does the rule of law help them? There seems to be a problem with the microphone. Uh, First of all, I'm very impressed by the line of falter falling. Well, obviously, every company, every charity has to have some involvement with the government, as these companies, these charities are a group of the people, and they have to be in talks with uh, government officials, and government agents in every type of public institute. There is a bit of involvement, and when government's sovereignty and power in economy or in other relations is a bit too much, uh, this is something that the governing body in our country is trying to rectify. They're trying to lessen the power, the reach of the government and the sovereignty. But right now, we're not living in those conditions. What I'm trying to get at is there's no such a thing as uh, government officials and the people. They're not two separate entities. Right now, we're looking forward to rectify their relationship, and it is also a cultural phenomena that we're trying to rectify. Other thing that I want to talk about is we need to respect the rules. Every country that has developed or is developing, the common thing between them is their population always respects the rules. Imagine you have consultation, uh, you had discourse, and after that you have put forth a good rule. But regulation only works when it is enforced. But when regulation is ignored largely, all of those things are wasted. Our parliament has two responsibility. One of them is regulation and legislation, and the other one is observing those regulations. In my belief, this observing is a need that has applications both in the public sector and in the private sector. And I wish that you had mentioned institutes. Another tool that we have is the tool of institutes. Institutes are a very nice tool to make ties with the government. This is something that needs more work. We don't have correct consultation, and we have something that's anti or something that's opposite of our values, as you said it, which is lobbying parties. And I believe the misuse of several of these tools, like the media, can actually lead to damage to the rule of law, sovereignty of law. Please let me allow me to show you some slides. I believe if we read these two quotes from our supreme leader, they're both very recent. Uh, two uh, two quotes that denote to that we do have enough rules and regulation, we have enough documents and titles, but right now we need more regulation and more enforcement of those rules. What's important to me is that these rules are followed up by appropriate enforcement. What I'm looking for is the sovereignty and rule of law. I myself believe that the public sector is not opposing to the rule of law, and I believe it's a wrong assumption to have that people have a problem or have or opposite have an opposition to the rule of law and sovereignty of law. And who do you think has who are the beneficiaries, benefactors of a lack of law and regulation, are corrupt individuals. Our problem is legislation officers and parliament members that are um making these rules and but not making sure they are enforced. They don't have sufficient follow up on them. Even us in the public sector who go to the private sector and government are sometimes even looking for more leeway or ways to go around the law. And I believe one of your concerns as service providers is getting a good product with a good quality to the people. And us in industry, the most important factor that we have is quality. We only prohibit the imports of goods that we have a sufficient or good enough alternative to in our own country. But when we reach the question of quality, it's an open question. In Iran, we have several institutes that their responsibility is quality evaluation, but unfortunately, we can't really trust them. It's quite a shame that um, even the enforcers of law are distrusting these institutes. Anyway, we believe that the rule of law, the sovereignty of law, is will be beneficiary to the development. And I believe the most important thing that could actually save us is the rules that we have would have a guarantee of enforcement. The repercussions of rules should be accepted. You should not look at it unilaterally. If a service provider or an importer is damaged because of the actions of the government or the change of the exchange rate, the volatility of the exchange rate, the government should be responsible for the demands of those providers and those who have been damaged. One of the things that shows the success of the rule of law has had in development is the damage you have done with your products and with your contracts and rules that you've been operating under. And they'll say, what does the sovereignty and rule of law has to do with the other types of sovereignty and governance? I believe it is sovereignty of logic itself. You described law as there are some conflicts or disputes in the wider public, and a regulator brings about a law, and these regulations are for the greater good of the public, and they follow the logic of the public, a collective logic. I recently heard one of the higher officials of the government say this. Uh, the left's influence on regulation and legislation has perversed most laws and most. We ourselves are working with most or all beneficiaries, and it is the collective logic that's the answer. And I believe that collective efforts must be taken to change some laws. Not it should not be rectified through one person or people. Unfortunately, the Pope has passed away. They have a way of announcing that they have concluded a new Pope with rising white smoke through the sky. Everyone has concluded and agreed. That's what they uh, announced with white smoke. I haven't seen that white smoke in Iran per se. We have regulations, but everyone is looking for the white smoke. As an example, we have a law to make medical equipment in Iran internally. Based on the rule, we should not be importing these medical equipments. But even the health ministry would invite several parties to tell them, let's reach a white smoke conclusion. Let's just import these. When they invited me, I disagreed. I didn't accept it because that would go against the law itself. If we're looking to solve an issue, we should do it through law, not go against it. And we've heard these things like they tell us to interact, be a kind person in the system, don't clash heads. Yes, that's right. We should have discourse, but discourse where they should take place on platforms for open discussion. Like here, we should be sitting next to each other and talk to each other and reach other conclusion. We shouldn't go against and name it interaction. And something that's important for me is we interpreted the word resistance economy and we interpreted that as just going against America. But sometimes we have some needs that require consolidation, and unfortunately, in our country, we have individuals who let these needs pile up, and they just delay those purchases because they need those to become crises so that they would be able to use the capacity allowed them by law to import goods. And that's something we see worldwide. Even during quarantine, the American government had to allow FDA to have some emergency, and everyone agreed with that principle. But if someone tries to carry out that same principle in terms of quality, no one agrees. There would be some opposition because that's the most valuable standard. And unfortunately, some people who are trying to avoid the due process for quality management would turn around and say, uh, "What am I looking for? I'm looking for the sovereignty of justice." They would use people as leverage to say and to prove their own point. And I mean that, and that's happening on your side of the discussion. But what we're looking for is every rule should prove the sovereignty of justice, not people, not individuals, by going around or escaping laws or, I don't know, going against laws. They shouldn't be able to go around the law. And justice should be served using the law and lawmaking and legislative powers. And based on your side of the argument, big companies have too much relations with the government and legislative powers, and we should use these relations to prevent media becoming tools. And if we really believe that widespread media is the fourth pillar of sovereignty and sovereign power, we should prevent them from creating a widespread panic or giving alien opposition tools and excuses without having the perpetrator be accountable. That's what they've been doing, and that's what we've been seeing today. And we need to ask ourselves, what is our purpose for having media as the fourth pillar? And one of the things that our Supreme Leader has said that I really liked a lot myself, he pointed out in his Fire at Will speech that what we need right now is civil institutes and our government should hold the public sector responsible for them to do their public responsibility. They should be held accountable to spend as much as they're getting on the well-being of the society. And we need to use technology and new ways and new innovation to enforce laws and legislative processes. But something that is important to me is everyone should be involved. Uh, we only get to experience peace and prosperity when we are successful in great competitions and in diplomacy, in technology, and can face our rivals and enemies on these fronts as well. And yes, we need continuous efforts, and but we need it on the basis of the law and in regulation with the law. And when they accept this as a principle of communication, if they accept to abide by the law, and that's when the lobbying parties and what you call consultors, that's when these parties can uh, operate under clarity and trust of the wider society. Well, when we speak about laws for public sector, we're actually talking about stability. Laws for companies and public companies means that they can plan for their future. They know what's going to happen, operate on their own predictions, and if they see something outside of those principles or without any law, that's why confusion comes from, and that's what causes confusion in the market. Well, I actually wanted to ask another question from Mr. Mousavi, considering how we in the innovation department, if we wanted to have innovation inside the framehold of the governments and government, considering how it's a rigid structure, we believe that it needs some intermediary companies and institutes to be able to establish connection and communication with beneficiaries and of rules and regulations, and also what we're seeing today in the Department of Innovation in the judiciary power is one of those. And from what you said, it can be inferred that GR is also establishing this kind of structure or communication with the governing power as well. We want to expand upon that, and you're actually a representative of a bigger or of one of the bigger companies involved in the market, and you've had the power and you saw the necessity of this kind of communication. We wanted to expand upon that experience for companies that are maybe smaller and maybe don't have the enough resources, or sometimes even the governing body's decisions can wipe them out. So they don't really have enough capital to form clear and appropriate communication with the governing body. So uh, for a company as big as yours, they can have a department called GR. But for small companies, do you have any recommendation for them? What road can they take to succeed? If I could, would like to answer your last question as well. Well, I don't expect any grown and mature individual to say that they don't like the rules or laws or regulations. It's something that I don't expect. I think the foundational question that we need to ask is what happens that people and agents don't want to abide by the law. Mr. Sabokdas made some examples, but I like to make some examples myself. Something that, based on my observation, that I've seen is it is about agents of law enforcement, and it is a conflict of interest in the medical sector, which is my dear friend's field of expertise. I had experience that was in a campaign that we wanted to use narratives and media. It was about on the counter prescriptions and drugs and OTCRs. Uh, Drugs that are available everywhere. But why can't we get them online? Even to this day, regulations and laws are against buying OTCRs online, even though every logical person would know that this is better for most than the traditional way of buying drugs, especially in terms of times of quarantine. It would have been better if it existed. And yeah, I'm not saying it shouldn't be regulated, especially it should especially be regulated, and it is throughout the world. And it is not something that we are the only person facing this problem. And yeah, every country, just even like Chile, Brazil, or even Japan, have faced these problems, and they have rules set in place for this, and we need to use their rules and use the lessons they learned. Well, when we examine the problem, and most people who are in charge of regulating and have legislative power are mostly big pharmaceuticals, or at least connected to them. And then you sit here and talk about law. So it is not an even playing field. People who are in legislative positions have a clear conflict of interest with most people. And you know what happened at the end? We had to let them play, so to speak. He's implying that they paid them off. The legislative powers problem were what's our share? And I believe in a lot of sectors it is the same. We can see this in importing cars, this section of importing furniture and household goods. And let us not even mention that prohibiting importing, there's a lot of research on it about how ineffective it is. And also, people who put forth these regulations shouldn't be able to profit off from them. But unfortunately, the people who put forth these regulations are most of the time beneficiaries of them. Even members of the parliament agree to it. I think we've heard of one parliament member who had 70 or 80 number of foreign cars, which I believe is just the crumbs of the pie, so to speak. So yeah, that's conflict of interest. And can I say another thing, please? I wanted to say that's just an example of big farmers. Unfortunately, it is inaudible. Unfortunately, they are the G. They're not GR. They don't need to communicate. They're the government. They're agents of the public sector. They're the government, and yeah, that's the main problem. They're playing on both fields. One of the main major problems in our country. That's something I've always said. One of our big problems is conflict of interest. When you also stress this, how can we deal with them? I believe that we need to create more faith and more trust into the rule of law, and that's what I was saying, to be honest. And like how these institutes that you said are both government and also playing in the public sector, how can we disrupt this corrupt game. Uh, do we need to use them for everything and keep feeding them? If we continue feeding them, what happens? Well, it happens as in what you can see will happen. If we fatten them and if we feed them more, we would have no other choice. We would have no other option at the end of the day. We just need to go through them. And my answer to this has always been if there is ever to be rectify, if you want to rectify any problem, you need to try to remain uncorrupt yourself because you want to create something beneficial to our society, and there's no biggest beneficial thing to our society than to keep its values and culture correct. That's how you can rectify and develop its economy. Whenever you see anywhere people trying to fight, trying to make a change in a country, their first slogan, their first thing on the topic list is corruption. I believe healthy communication with the government should be on our priority. Public institutes or institutes belonging to the people and everyone, they should be able to increase the rule of law, the sovereignty of law, and solve the issue of conflict of interest. The other thing that I wanted to say is pertaining to the philosophy of law. My major was also philosophy, so for me it is more important. What is the aim of a rule or law? Probably facilitating some communications and connections and using regulations to and using regulating relations and using those metrics for the betterment of society, for well-being of everyone. The laws and rules that if a law is legislated or an article is legislated and needs to get to a enforcement degree, needs people to be behind it, and that needs cooperation. And I don't imagine representatives of that are being elected with only 10% of population taken to the booth and actually voting. I don't believe these representatives are capable of legislating laws and articles that have people's follow the same train of thought as people, because 80% of people believe that that is not their representative. A big part of that is the legitimacy that people give to those legislative powers when lawmakers are there that 80% of people don't approve of, and that's following the same logic the revolution was. Revolution was supposed to make lawmakers and representatives follow the train of thought people do. But when there's such a large divide between these representatives and people, we ask ourselves, why are these representatives of us? Can you really call them representatives when only 10% voted for them? And if these representatives create a law, pass a law or bill, naturally they can't accept people following them and people believe them. And most of the time they pass up bills that most people don't really agree with or don't really approve of. Even all of you here, is there anyone who doesn't have a VPN on their phone? And when you have laws like this, that everyone breaks them or most people break them, that actually damages the concept of law itself. When when you lower the status of law, and then have a law that 100% of those lawmakers even break them themselves, how can we respect other laws? How can we expect other people, other celebrities, or even people of influence not break them? It is very important to not pass bills or in laws, not pass bills that even lawmakers can't abide by. It's and these VPNs and filterings are, to be honest, a focal point. They need to be focused on. It's either we didn't really pass a good and rightful law, or we did pass a rightful law, but we couldn't convince people to abide by them. My field of expertise is actually PI myself. There was a interview with Miss Angela Merkel. She has an interview with Spiegel. There was a very respected journalist conducted the interview. It was towards the latter half of her presidency or prime ministry. Most prime ministers and elected officials do this to talk about their accomplishments, their failures, and their experiences in the latter half of their term. And there was a question about one of the disastrous laws that they had passed about immigration. As you know, in years of 2013, 2012, um, they had accepted a large number of immigrants, close to half a million in those years, and it was quite influential in economical crises they were facing those years. And when you have close to half a million immigrants who are quite very young, they're not very expert, they don't really know the language, and they were really damaging the economy. The journalist asked if that decision was an expert decision that your government had made, and Miss Merkel turns around and says, "No. Are you responsible for that law?" Merkel turns around and says, "No." So the journalist asks, "Who is responsible for this?" Um, Merkel says that we have an Institute of Public Opinion in our government, and when an expert decision is to be made, um, this institute that has a number of experts in a number of fields like philosophy, economy, and public policy makers. If an expert decision is to be made, this institute has to evaluate either if the public opinion is behind this decision or not. And if 70 or 80% of public opinion is behind that decision, it is made. And sometimes experts have different ideas, so they might not make that decision based on that. Yes, it is a mob, and it is a mob. Society is a mob, so they might not know better. So the PR sector of our government, based on how important that decision is, has about 6 months to a year to align the expert's opinion with the public opinion. So Ms. Merkel said that for that decision, the PR sector of the government was not able to align the public opinion on with the expert opinion. So that decision was not made in the year they failed. So they didn't make that decision. I really couldn't believe it myself. I had goosebumps. How can this be? The government of a country could reach an expert decision and it never materialized. Decision that could have potentially crippled the economy, the country's economy. Mr. Sabkadst starts. You could talk about the opposite of it. The age of retiring in France. It was a difficult decision. They also have a PR department. Didn't we see those rallies, and widespread protests on that took place on Sundays. But they passed the law. And let's look at the results. Certainly, there are two sides to every story. We can't really look at an example in seclusion. These decisions need to take place consciously. Like we said, every environment is different. People are different. Every culture is different. Eastern culture, your feelings versus your logic, influential groups, like you said, PR sectors sometimes do that. Sometimes there's a religious figure that makes that decision. So these factors always interact with each other. And we have contradicting examples, and sometimes we have reached what the opposite of what you're expecting. What I want to say is convincing the general public is not something in the priority in our country. And yes, they both agree. Let's just stay on the main topic. There are many subjects to discuss. Yes, the discussion is taking off, kinda, and it's a good discussion to have. It's a very important discussion to have for us people in the public sector. Even though you haven't done a good enough job of media work, covering, getting people in here, but we too are excited to have this talk. I believe the conversation is going well, but it is important to take pride of the people in the public sector. We believe in these conversations and these discussions, and we both believe there are problems that we need to rectify. And something else we agree on both is to have platforms for open discussion and free thinking discussion, and that is also a part of the convincing of the people that you said. And that is also some of that also falls on us in the public sector. In our company as well, we've had a platform for public discussions on Thursdays. We've tried to include experts in different fields who are very effective in convincing people. Well, I haven't followed the example you gave, but most of the time that PR efforts fail is when people with platforms and people who are in the minority or privileged minority, people who are trusted by the government, when these people go against what the policymakers are saying, you can't really expect the general public to follow those rules. When these PR campaigns are successful, when they have the backing of scientific communities and experts, these legitimate institutes of knowledge, when they are followed in these campaigns, when they have the backing of those campaigns, then they are successful. We always say or prioritize rationality in policymaking. If we don't abide by it, if what you said is true, when 10% of people vote for the representatives, everyone is uh, responsible to uphold laws, and that's the only way I see to get out of that particular predicament. Well, let me change the subject and talk about GR. One of the common things we've seen, or most people are here on their phone. They're not really listening to us. There are media processes that in governmental relations that can help people to be convinced and of a rule or law and help them be accepted more because the government is also a beneficiary and also has an effect on the bills that are passing. As I was saying at the beginning, if a law is useful and good and right, what you said also kind of pertains to this. Imagine a secluded town in Iran, maybe the most eligible number of voters would be like 50,000, and imagine 100% of those 50,000 vote for this person. I don't really think if that one person had more percentage of voters, he's going to be a better representative of people. And I wanted to say this: if the process of lawmaking and legislative powers are shaped in a correct way, even that representative with 10% of votes is forced to make decisions that are good for the general public. And yeah, we both agree. But what I wanted to say that in an election that has only 10% of the eligible voters participating, aligning public opinion on those laws is quite difficult. My point is, why are we discussing GR, governmental relations? GR is one of those one of the things that directly correlates the beneficiaries and the lawmakers. We had a company from the public sector that appeared in one of our meetings, and the things he said completely changed the way of thinking and way of decision making in our company. Yes, the lawmaker there is quite busy and has a lot of things on his mind and priorities. But for those companies, it is their first opportunity and the first priority. What I'm saying is the point that these companies could raise could have significant positive effects. In your example, in India, they had education. Imagine you want to send like 100 of representatives, parliament representatives to another. If we do send them, if we send them to participate in a workshop, they would have a lot of corruption and things like that. So when we don't have an infrastructure and the culture for that, the thing that happens is these representatives have a lot of things on their minds and a lot of priorities, and when they don't have sufficient data, you can't even expect them to sit down and do research on every little subject. You can expect that. What does that result in? Like I said, in the private sector, uh, GR institutes should help, and other institutes, and also, like my friend Sabakdast said, institutes, free thinking institutes, and platforms for expert institutes and association. Like in we have the Association of Online Trading and Online Commerce. Uh, Parliament representatives could actually uh, rely on the decisions that these people and these associations make because they don't really have the expertise enough to make decisions. So they would rely on their opinions. Yes, as I was saying, if the infrastructure and communications are set in place, even if the representative is not a representative of the way of thinking of people, the decision that they make is from an expert's opinion of different fields. I said all of that to just say that these communication being established is something bilateral. Trust is also by principle bilateral. It's a two-way street. And an important point in the cultural aspects of things is the subject of clarity. When we talk about conflicts of interest, do those decrease? When clarity increases. This fact or this reality of lobbying in most countries is seen as something positive because in most countries and people know it is it's a legal and process that is clear to the people. Like they know Elon Musk is meeting with Trump to do this and this and that. They know he's lobbying for his own agenda. If we make things clear in our own country as well, clear to the public, like we've seen in in the judicial power event that they named Hamyar, something that is happening these days as well. They would invite representatives of public sector to have meetings with representatives of the parliament. What I'm trying to say if is that if we have the right structure for these communications between parties, we would have better and rightful regulation, and also we would decrease conflict of interest as well. Like the example you said, because big pharmaceutical companies would be talking and being involved with each other, and that was not clear. That was not something you knew before or was made clear. I've seen this in other countries, like any representative would make clear his relation with the public sector. They would announce them. And yes, we were talking to a representative of the parliament, and they said that we can't just meet with your company. And he was scared. So the first steps of a relationship could not take shape. And also, it is not right to become the representative, make the representative a beneficiary. They need to make the relation more clear and more open to the public. What I'm saying is to see beneficiaries to the benefit of the greater public, and that's the job of the law. That's what the functionality of law is for. And the problems we're facing are unique. Uh, we see these in the world. Like you talked about Trump and Elon Musk. He actually announced that there was a widespread corruption in a lot of institutes, so he shut them down. So governing bodies have experience or accumulate experience as time passes. What we need to do is focus on beneficiaries. If you solve the problem of the public sector, it would be to the benefit of the greater public. But if you, in trying to fix the problem, give unique rights to a selected few, that is the worst thing you can do when trying to solve that issue. And and do you also agree that most of the relationships between the public sector and their government is taking place like that? And that is what I'm saying. Yes, I agree, and that is dangerous. And that is how it is right now. Yes, we should look at it realistically. This is not optimal. This situation we're in is obviously not optimal, but I don't think that we should change approach to what others have done in the past. Yes, there are many forms of protest and showing your frustration. They could take place through associations. They could take place through widespread protest, and there are many ways to express your voice. Maybe maybe through joint institute ventures, maybe even take place through several dissidents. And yes, we as the educated minority and people in the public sector, we should not we should not be part of the problem and part of the corrupt relations. We should be looking for healthy and right relations. And both speakers agree. The third speaker adds, well, the forming of clarity and also responsibility. I was once speaking with a representative of the parliament. I'm not going to say what because it would give it away, but he said that one time to solve a problem, we had data from the private sector, and they told us if this and this and that happens, it would result in that, and we operated under those consultations, and but what they said did not come to fruition. So it's a two-way street. We should also hold the private sector accountable. If they make commitments to bring about a good thing for the public or a good benefit for the public, if they don't succeed in, they should be held responsible. It's a bilateral trust that is being built. In this panel, I'm really looking for like what structure and what way of communication should we design for it to be effective, uh, both from the private sector's point of view and also from the public sector's point of view. Objective of their meetings should be towards both the greater public's benefit and also the public sector's benefit. Well, the reality of it is that an important part of innovation is accepting risk. But I believe that, yes, you were right. Someone who takes a risk is should also be held accountable, yes. But both parties, the government and the public sectors, should be held accountable. The risk of the public sector is that they might lose a market. The greater public is not going to give you 1,000 chances, so you should be careful. That's how the market operates. But I'll ask this: what is the risk for the government? How I believe it should be is for those officials, the risk should be not being elected, either as if it's representatives or other officials. If I'm just getting elected willy-nilly and I'm not making decisions to the benefit of the greater public, and I'm not facing any repercussions for my actions, then what's the point? So I believe the risk to reward system should be more intricately designed. And the second point I want to raise is that the public sector should expand their perspective in terms of benefit to the greater public. It is a rarity to see people who actually view the point of benefit to the greater public as a priority. And unfortunately, throughout the years, we've seen in the public sector a rise in individualism and a lack of care to the greater benefit of the people. This has also been brought about by inflation and other factors, and we've been living under a very high inflation rate for a number of years. And there's a book that I'd like to mention called Principles and Inflation. In the book, it explains how living under high inflation rates for about maybe for, 30 or 40 years completely broke down principle and the moral pillars of a society. So as you can see, the problem is multidimensional, and we've been living under inflation rates as high as 50% for years, for 15 years. So that brings about lack of security for the public sector, and when you don't have enough security, that makes it a rarity for you to see people who actually prioritize the greater public's benefit in the public sector. And I'm not saying to ignore your own profit or your own benefit or the investors' benefits, and but in our general approach, we should ask ourselves how can we co-align or align my benefit and my profit to the greater people's benefit, greater public's benefit. It is only then when government officials see me as a collaborator rather than a rival. And yes, as you all know, innovation has its own risk. Well, I like to say it, memory as well. During quarantine, um, it was platforms were supposed to distribute necessary ingredients like milk and meat and stuff like that. And many online commerce companies had proposals to shoulder this responsibility. And at the end, a company took this responsibility that was only founded for a week. And at the end of all that, we found out that uh, a minister's son really thought about like what a great opportunity, why not us? And this is what I mean by conflict of interest. And that's something lawmakers and people who are responsible do. Then that's what discourages the private sector, like us. Unfortunately, it discourages us from mm, the lawmakers and responsible officers. And on the other hand, it creates a loophole from hell, a negative loophole from hell. And when the private sector sees behaviors like this, they think to themselves, so, excuse me for my bluntness, but to hell with the greater public's benefit. And these are destructive behaviors that are taking place on both sides and both parties, and I think both should stop them. And I believe that the lawmakers and responsible governmental officers should ask the lawmaker institutes to strengthen their. And I believe what damages a rule and law is these laws that are being broken by the lawmakers, and this bilateral trust making and trust building is what strengthens the relation between the innovation ecosystem and the governing ecosystem. And this example that you gave is one of those that damages the relationship between the two ecosystem. Yes, trust is built over years, but breaking it is something that happens very quickly with one decision. And we are nearing the end point. It is 6 o'clock already. From our dear attendees, if there is any question or any point you want to talk about, we are here at your service. Uh, it seems that there is no question because of the quality of the session. What we did try to do in this panel and talk about was the formation of these two institutes from the private sector and also the government. The private from the private sector's part, it takes place as the GR department. It is a notarized and official channel of communication with the governing body, and from the government's point of view, they can gain educational benefits from this relation. They'll know, they'll understand some things that they didn't know before. They'll have government will gain benefits through data. It would have beneficiaries accompanying them and supporting and cooperating with them. As Mr. Sabakdast mentioned, these beneficiaries could actually be observing the regulations and seeing if they're abided by or not. And they could act as a PR department for these laws and regulations. What we stressed on the principles of GR is the matter of clarity to the public, how both of them should be held responsible for the relationship and the relations they're doing, and how making trust and building trust is bilateral. And we talked about how big companies can use the structure of GR, and smaller companies could use the structure or the way of other institutes, intermediary institutes. And From the perspective of the government, we talked about institutes that are connected to the judiciary power, like Hamyar. We talked about lobbying parties. Uh, Ideally, they would operate in a glass room with full clarity, and we would know who are the beneficiaries of the private sector who are lobbying. It should be accessible to all companies, regardless of position, size, or power. And throughout all of these, we would hope to reach what we call rightful and good rules and laws. I'd like to thank everyone here who accompanied us. Uh, both speakers are thanking each other. I like to thank both speakers who are here. And yes, Mr. Sabkdst points out the difference in age. Yes, we are not looking for good and rightful laws. We are looking for uh, good governance and good and rightful governance. We're not looking for good rules and good laws. We're looking for good governance and good regulations. And yes, God willing, we're both looking for the same thing. And we hope to, as representatives of the private sector, with the help of people and our nation, reach this goal of good governance and good regulations. And we hope this platform has done its job, and our message can reach a wide audience that it needs to. Thank you. Have a round of applause for yourselves, and goodbye.